The ghost returns. Fade in, black. Cut to submersible camera descending into blue darkness. Particles drift like snow. Narrator VO. 7 decades after she vanished into the abyss, one of America's most storied aircraft carriers rises again, not from the waves, but from memory. Cut to floodlights sweep over an enormous flight deck, perfectly preserved. Ghostly aircraft sit frozen in place, their insignia still vibrant. Narrator VO. 3,000 meters down, the Lady Lex sleeps, intact, untouched, and waiting. A time capsule of war, lost for 76 years. Archival footage. 1930s naval exercises. Biplanes launching, sailors laughing on deck. Narrator. When the USS Lexington was commissioned in 1927, she was unlike any ship afloat. Fast, elegant, fearsome. One of America's first carriers, and one of its greatest. By 1942, the Lady Lex stood between the Japanese Empire and the lifeline of Australia. Her final stand at the Battle of the Coral Sea altered the course of the Pacific War. But after her sinking, she became a legend. A ship spoken of in mess halls and history books, but never seen again. Until now. Cut to Paul Allen's research vessel Petrel launching ROVs. Narrator. In 2018, 76 years after she disappeared beneath the waves, explorers found what no one thought possible. The Lexington, lying upright on the seafloor, preserved by the cold and the dark. Over 35 aircraft, guns still pointing outward, her nameplate untouched. A war grave, a ghost ship, a rediscovered chapter of history.
A ship that shouldn't have been. The Lexington began life not as an aircraft carrier, but as a battle cruiser. Under the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922, the world's great navies were forced to halt construction of massive capital ships. But the treaty included a loophole that would change naval history. 6 American battle cruisers could be converted into aircraft carriers. Only 2 would be chosen.
The Lexington's hull was already laid down when the treaty hit. Instead of scrapping her bones, the U.S. Navy transformed them. Lexington would become 888 feet long, 33 knots top speed, thanks to battle cruiser turbines, and capable of carrying 78 aircraft in peacetime. America's first fast carrier. Her design broke the mold. Where British carriers were compact, armored, and conservative, the Lexington was expansive, powerful, and experimental, a floating laboratory for the future of naval aviation. The ship that shouldn't have been. Cut to 1920s naval shipyard, sparks flying, steel beams lowered into place. Narrator VO. The Lexington began life not as an aircraft carrier, but as a battle cruiser. Under the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922, the world's great navies were forced to halt construction of massive capital ships. But the treaty included a loophole that would change naval history. 6 American battle cruisers could be converted into aircraft carriers. Only 2 would be chosen. Cut to montage of blueprints transforming from battle cruiser silhouette to carrier deck plan.
Throughout the 1930s, the Lexington became the beating heart of American carrier tactics. She helped pioneer deck-load launches, combat air patrol techniques, early carrier-based dive bombing, massed strike doctrine, high-speed carrier maneuvers. In fleet exercises, she embarrassed battleships repeatedly, her aircraft sinking entire fleets before the gunners even opened their eyes. Fictional admirals quote, "The Lexington proved one truth: the future belonged to the carrier." But that future would demand a terrible price.
Early records and experiments. Cut to vintage flight operations footage. Narrator. Throughout the 1930s, the Lexington became the beating heart of American carrier tactics. She helped pioneer deck-load launches, combat air patrol techniques, early carrier-based dive bombing, massed strike doctrine, and high-speed carrier maneuvers. In fleet exercises, she embarrassed battleships repeatedly, her aircraft sinking entire fleets before the gunners even opened their eyes. Fictional admiral's quote, "The Lexington proved one truth. The future belonged to the carrier. But that future would demand a terrible price." Cut to Lexington at sea, crew listening to emergency broadcasts. Narrator VO. When news of Pearl Harbor reached the Lady Lex, the mood aboard shifted instantly. Fictional radio announcement. Attack by Japanese aircraft at Pearl Harbor. Multiple battleships burning. Her crew braced for war. Within days, Lexington began hunting for the Japanese strike force, a futile attempt, but one that marked the ship's transformation from peacetime marvel to frontline predator. The Lexington served as a workhorse during the chaotic first months of World War II. She covered convoys to Midway and the U.S. West Coast, attempted a raid on Wake Island, supported operations in the South Pacific, and conducted aggressive sorties to counter Japanese advances. Her aircraft, Buffaloes, Wildcats, Dauntlesses, clashed with Zeros for the first time. Pilots wrote of the shock. "Those Zeros climbed like angels and turned like devils. You survived by staying fast, staying low, and staying lucky." Narrator. Japan's next move was clear. Sever Australia's supply line by capturing Port Moresby. The Imperial Navy launched Operation MO, a bold strike to take New Guinea and isolate the Allied presence in the region. To counter it, the U.S. committed two carriers, USS Yorktown, CV-5, and USS Lexington, CV-2. Together, they formed Task Force 17. This small force would soon face the full might of the Japanese Kido Butai. Cut to Lexington sailors preparing for battle, arming bombs, loading torpedoes, aircraft taxiing. In early May 1942, Lexington raced toward the Coral Sea. Her decks roared with activity. Wildcats prepped for cap, Devastators armed with torpedoes, Dauntless dive bombers loaded with 500-pounders. A rising sun breaks across the Pacific horizon. The massive, dark silhouette of USS Lexington, CV-2, cuts through the morning haze, bow smashing through gentle waves. February 1942. With America now at war, the USS Lexington, Lady Lex, steams westward into a Pacific Ocean teeming with uncertainty. The Japanese Empire has swept across Asia and the Pacific in a tidal wave of conquest. Now, Lexington's task force is among the few carriers left to oppose them. Cut 2. Flight deck crew at dawn. Men perform checks on aircraft. F-4F Wildcats, SBD Dauntlesses, TBD Devastators. The deck vibrates like a living creature. Narrator. Lexington was never meant to fight a war alone. She and her sister ship Saratoga were designed for a world where naval aviation was still experimental. But after the devastating loss of battleships at Pearl Harbor, these carriers became America's spearhead. Camera. Tight close-up on the red-lit plotting table. Grease pencil marking grid squares. Rear Admiral Wilson Brown, grave. Until reinforcements arrive, we are the Pacific Fleet. Map cutscene. Animated map showing Lexington's route departing Pearl Harbor toward Rabaul. Narrator. Her mission: strike the major Japanese base at Rabaul. It would be the United States' first carrier offensive of World War II. Pilot's briefing room. Captain Fred Sherman, XO, stands before the squadron. Listen up. Rabaul is no small target. Heavy flak, capable fighter opposition. We go in hard, we go in fast. Let's show the Japanese the Lady Lex is still in the fight. Lieutenant William Pug Sutherland, fighter pilot. Sir, what if we don't catch them by surprise? Then we hit them anyway. The room laughs tensely.
Narrative and analysis. Narrator. The Rabaul strike would test the carrier doctrine of hit and fade warfare. The risks were enormous. The Japanese Navy possessed superior numbers, battle-hardened pilots, and the momentum of victory. But Lexington's aviators were determined to carry the war straight to the enemy. Exterior, flight deck, early morning. A pilot touches the edge of Lexington's towering island superstructure. Pilot, quiet prayer. Let's bring her home, Lady Lex. Tactical explanation. Cut to 3D map animation. Lexington's position northeast of New Britain. Approach vector toward Rabaul. Japanese airfields with zero ranges. Weather conditions with cloud cover models. Narrator. Lexington would launch at extreme range, over 300 miles, pushing the limits of early war naval aircraft. Every gallon of fuel mattered. If pilots lingered over the target, they would never return.
Fade in. Visual. Lexington's deck pitching slightly. Aircraft lined up for launch. The Pacific below is a deep cerulean blue. Narrator. February 20th, 1942. At 0720, Lexington's pilots prepared to begin their long flight toward Rabaul, but the Japanese found them first. Scene. Japanese reconnaissance plane spotted. On Lexington Bridge, lookouts peer into the sky. Lookout. Bogey, high altitude, bearing 270. Over the loudspeakers. General quarters, general quarters. All hands man your battle stations. Crews sprint across the deck. Narrator. A Japanese flying boat had discovered the task force. In an instant, Lexington's offensive mission pivoted into a desperate fight for survival. Fighter launch. Camera, close tracking shot of Wildcats rolling forward. Air boss. Launch fighters, get those Wildcats airborne now.
Dialogue during a dogfight. Lieutenant Sutherland. I've got one diving, breaking left. Radio static. Japanese pilot. Kani, tora no ana, the tiger's den. Explosion as a Beatty bomber erupts in flames. Narrator. For 20 minutes, the sky over Lexington was a swirling vortex of tracers, explosions, and screaming engines. Dauntless dive bombers on deck, fueled and armed, sat vulnerable to even a single enemy hit. Cut to. A gunner chants under his breath as he reloads belts of ammunition. Not today, not today. Turning point. A Japanese bomber breaks through the fighter screen, lining up on Lexington. Captain Sherman on bridge. Bring her to port! Hard to port! Lexington turns sharply. The bomber misses its torpedo run, glancing off the bow and crashing into the sea. Crew erupt in cheers. Narrator. By 08:15, the final attackers were shot down or fleeing. Lexington had survived her first real test of war, thanks to the courage and skill of her aviators. Lexington at center. Japanese attack vectors. Fighter interception arcs. AA fire zones. Bombers falling in the water. Narrator. The ambush over Rabaul proved that carrier warfare would be defined by speed, radar detection, and decisive air power. Lexington had held her own.